Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Million Pound Mission Podcast. It's your buddy Adam, the PhD, the previously heavy dude, and this is episode number 373. We're talking about stop trying to fix yourself. Stop trying to fix yourself with my friend Alexa Schirm, and she just went off on this one. You're going to really enjoy it. First, quick shout out to our sponsor at KetoBrick.com. If you're living a low-carb lifestyle and you haven't checked out the Keto Brick, you are missing out on a perfect macronutrient-based 1,000-calorie brick of deliciousness. The buttered maple pecan flavor launched a few weeks ago. That was amazing. My daughter said it tastes like pancakes, so of course she loved it. I'm really rocking the toasted almond coconut lately. I've been out in my tree stand hunting deer, and I chop up the bricks into little bite-sized bits. It's cold out, so it's a little hard to eat the solid whole brick without breaking my teeth off, but they kind of freeze up a little bit. So I chop up a toasted almond coconut brick, take it out into my tree stand. I can snack on that a little bit. It keeps me out there hunting a little bit longer, so that's what I'm jamming on. So if you guys go and check out the Keto Bricks at KetoBrick.com, be sure to enter the promo code MPM as in Million Pound Mission, and you will be entered to win a free month of bricks, and that is priceless, my friends. KetoBrick.com. Also, we're in the big countdown. 3 episodes left in this podcast. 3 episodes left to wrap up the Million Pound Mission podcast. We got today's interview. I've got one more interview coming next week, and then the finale episode is just me and you. I'll explain everything about what I am transitioning into next with my new show launching in January. Again, you won't have to go anywhere. If you're already subscribed to this one, it's just going to flip over to the new show. I've got some rowdy co-hosts coming on with me. We have a unique format for the health space. Let me just tell you, I'll tell you that much. It's going to be a unique format that you haven't seen anywhere else. It's never been done in podcasting before in the way that we're going to do it. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So that is something you have to look forward to. Speaking of something to look forward to, let's talk about this episode. I originally got a hold of Alexa. She's one of my favorite people. Like, she's my friend. She's been to my house. She's spoke at my event last year. I know that you guys love her stuff, and our audiences mingle really well together. Our messages complement each other's really, really well. And I know that she was doing some rebranding, and I wanted to kind of shine a light on that and tell you guys what she has going on. That was kind of the basis of the conversation, and it evolved quickly and really interestingly as we got going, and it turned into this conversation about her like self-discovery. And that's why I titled it Stop Trying to Fix Yourself. That was a theme that kept on popping up in the conversation. I know a lot of us beat ourselves up. We're always just like, this is the next thing that's wrong with me. And she gives us a different perspective. So she's going to really help us discover what it is we actually want and then go out and achieve it. So in this episode, we talk about what we should be doing instead of trying to constantly fix ourselves. We talk about not giving into pressure to be something that we aren't. We talk about what she means by don't start from a negative score. And then we do dive into her new brand and what she's got cooking with that. And that's all very exciting as well. So this one's going to fire you up. Just as a warning, you're kind of wrapping up the holiday season. I feel like this is good timing, and I think that you will have a little fire lit up underneath you after you listen to Alexa. Honestly, I don't do a whole lot of talking in this one. I just kind of light the fuse and watch the Alexa bomb go off, and it's awesome. Like, she really rocked it. So I think you're going to enjoy this one. And to be sure, if you do enjoy this, share it out on your Instagram story at Million Pound Mission. Tag me up so I can share it out as well. I appreciate you guys. I'm looking forward to the home stretch here. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Without any further delay, here is episode number 373, Stop Trying to Fix Yourself, with Alexa Schirm. All right, Alexa Schirm, you are back on the Million Pound Mission podcast, one of my most downloaded episodes ever. I don't know if you know that. You're top 10 out of almost 400 episodes. You're in the top 10. Episode 191 was the debut. So yeah, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, you are definitely a fan favorite. My audience is obsessed with Alexa Schirm. It's a well-known fact inside of our community. So they're going to be super fired up. When I leaked that we were doing another interview, they lost their minds.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad. I wish your family would love me as much as your audience does.
I mean, if you can adopt some more kids, that are
Yeah.
like 40 years old, there'd be a long line. So
Yeah.
just saying. Now we need to get caught up. Like you and I have touched base a little bit, but you got quite
Mhm.
a bit going on. You got a whole rebranding situation happening. So
Yeah.
why don't you catch up our audience on why you're rebranding Simple Roots Radio and kind of the thinking
Mhm.
that led up to that? So I think it's something that needs to be discussed because I think a lot of people will relate to the things that are going on in your head.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, like when we caught up right before the show, I had mentioned that it kind of all started at the conference that you had, which I mean, it was a little bit before that. I think when I came, I was kind of like in the spot of like, I just feel like something's off and I could not pinpoint what it was. And I was kind of going in these deep places of healing for myself. And, I just, like you said, you just saw me doing some deep thinking, I was on and off Instagram and, just really just sorting through things. And I feel like I'm naturally a deep thinker anyways. And I kind of got into my head about, am I just being another noisy nutrition expert on the market telling you all the things that you had to do and, all the problems you had and here's your solution. And, I was just like, am I just more noise in the space or am I actually doing something to actively help people? And I think in the process of my own healing journey, one of the things that really started to frustrate me was this fact that I had a lot of business people in my life and even my own family who was like, if you just be yourself, everything will fall into place. Everything will happen that you want to happen. And honestly, I was in search of this for months of like reading self help books and going to counseling. And like, I remember one day sitting there and I looked at my counselor and I said, what is it going to take to find myself? Like everyone's telling me when you just be yourself, then everything will happen. Everything you want will happen. And I think we get that message a lot of like, okay, where you are obviously isn't you, because if it were, you would be happy, you would be joy filled, you would be all these things that you need to be. And so she looked at me and she said, whoever told you that you aren't you? And I was like, what do you mean? Everyone's telling me I'm not me. She's like, no, I want you to really think and think like, what makes you think that the you right now isn't actively you? I was like, because there's a million and one self-help books on the market telling me all the things I should be. I was just so frustrated that she just kept throwing it back at me. And honestly, it was one of the most transformational days. And I left there and I was still like, my head was spinning. And I was like, I think what she's trying to get me to understand is like, I am me. And the more people are telling me I'm not me or that I need to be a better version of me was just creating this disassociation with myself. And I think in that span of dissociation, we see this a lot in the health space. And what I've learned over the last year is so many of us are kind of walking around in this body that we live in, but wishing or trying to find all of these other things because we think that ourselves, or we've been told that ourselves are not enough, like that we aren't ourselves. And therefore, you need to go out in search of it. And the biggest breakthrough I had was like, no, that is noise. That is not helpful. That's causing confusion. That's causing me to dissociate with myself. And in this process of dissociation and the process of kind of having a body, but not really actively filling that body, it was just filled with all kinds of frustration and anger and sadness and envy and jealousy. Like all of these negative feelings kind of filled that gap that I was trying to fill by finding myself. And so I just realized we do this so often in the health space. And I think this is where this huge pivot came in, is that maybe none of us need to be fixed, right? Yeah, the health space is quick to tell you that you have all these problems, that you're 40 pounds overweight, and that you have an autoimmune disease, or don't eat sugar, for God forbid that that's going to do something to you. We get so dissociated with our bodies that I was finding people couldn't even tell me when they were hungry or when they were full. Like, we just had this lack of total awareness of our bodies. And I started to completely understand that, because I, in the process of this, was listening to all these outside voices telling me who I was, but I didn't know that for myself. And really, I think in the process of that, we're setting these unachievable bars that say, like, okay, who you are isn't enough, as if we've kind of walked ourselves here. And I think one of the big points for this at your conference was listening to Sean Mulroney. And, like, I think what's so hard for me in this space is that I have not sat down with one person who willed themselves 100 pounds overweight. No one asked for that. No one asks for an autoimmune disease or cancer. No one gets themselves there on purpose. And I feel like the message that we have is like, well, this was your fault. Now you got to figure out how to get out of it. And let me sell you a system that's going to be the perfect answer to your problem. And what I realized, even in my own life, is that once we have a fixation on a problem, we put mass amounts of energy and focus on that problem. And guess what? That problem never leaves, because we have created a structure of our minds that is so fixated on it, that becomes our home. And so I feel like so many of us are just living in the space that we don't like, that we physically don't feel good, because no one's told us that it's okay to be home in our own body and love ourselves well. We don't have to go in a series of all these other great things people tell you is the best system for you. The most important thing is like that we essentially come home and embody our body, to see our body, to know that we didn't get here on purpose. And that, in fact, every process in your body that did that, like, our body is either it's always acting in love. That either looks like love, right? Like, that we think of thin and healthy and energized, or it's self-protection, which is also a form of love. But self-protection often comes out in autoimmune diseases. It often comes out in weight gain and all these protective mechanisms that the body has just to keep you alive. So I recognized I was just such a threat to my own life by seeking all of these things, that I was physically unwell, simply because I was never allowing myself to experience me. Like, I was constantly running away from me in search of me, and you'll never find it, right? It's like a dog chasing its own tail. Like, it never ends. And so that's where this whole message came from. And this is obviously, I'm passionate about this, of like, what if I could get people to see that their problems are not their problems to be fixed? Like, yes, it's going to take work. Yes, it's going to take all these things. But really, what if we could change our mindset from, I have all these problems, to, no, I just need to be filled. Like, so then food is no longer a problem or a fix to your problem. It becomes a solution to give you energy and nourishment. Like, it's just a mindset shift, I think, enough that it kind of transitions all the things that we've been researched and told are good, but it makes you create desire because you recognize it for what it is, not for what it can do for you.
Yes. And like, listen to you talk, I can tell how passionate you are about this. And I know, like, because we're friends and I've seen you, we've talked enough times, and I noticed the way you're posting on Instagram like a year ago, and I could tell the stuff that you were going back and forth with in your head. And, seeing you in person at the event, we got to interact a little bit there. Like, I was picking up on this. So I'm so proud of you, because it's hard. Like, it's hard. One of the hardest choices, I believe, as humans, is to choose to be happy, like presently happy.
Yeah.
Because there's always like, oh, like for me, the last time we hung out was last October, a year ago. What was going through my head is, I'll be really happy once I sell my gym and I can be a full-time podcaster. Mm-hmm. And I did that in December. And then there was the next thing that I was feeling pressure about, and I have to constantly remind myself, I'm like, okay, here's where I am. Here's where I was 10 years ago. You kind of have to have that conversation with your past self a little bit and be like, what was I freaking out about then that I've actually overcome now? I'm sitting in a good place now.
Yeah.
Do I have goals? Do I have things that I haven't achieved yet? Yeah, but that's kind of called life. And I haven't perfected the human experience, and I never will.
Yeah.
But just sitting and going, you know what? I'm happy. I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of where
Yeah.
I'm at. I'm good. You know, I have good relationships. I'm healthy and I'm happy. And just like having some of that self-talk happening
Yeah.
versus, well, why haven't I,
Yeah.
why am I not $1 million
Yeah.
podcaster at this
Right.
point? You know, things like that. So just, it's
Mhm.
really hard putting that kind of work in. And I'm proud of you for making this shift, because then it's a big deal because you are leading others down a path with your show. You're a community leader. You're a community organizer. You know, you've got people that follow what you say, that people like in my audience that are obsessed with every word that Alexa puts out there. So it's a big deal to make a pivot. So let's talk about the new brand a little
Mhm.
bit, and kind of, you started to get into it there at the end, but like what the new brand is all about.
Yeah. So the new brand is simply about filling. So I look at the body, and if we get into a biological perspective, I think what changes and differentiates humans from every other species is that we're not just a biological, chemical filled body. Yes, other species also have mind, but I think that we also have another element of the soul that creates these belief patterns in our body. And ultimately, what we see biologically is our body is a direct output of what we believe, because our brains chemical reactions and all the neurotransmitters that are sending signals to your body are coming from a perception of if the world is safe or if the world is unsafe. And we could be sitting in the same room and you could be like, hey, life is great. And I could be so consumed that my life is falling apart and I don't know what I'm talking about. And am I leading people astray? That everything is a threat. Like I said, I was a threat to myself simply because I couldn't ever find safety and the person that I was. And so living biologically in a space of stress and insecurity leads to a process in the body called fight or flight mode, right? Our sympathetic response. And this is what I call survival mode. And we see so many people living here. And the process of this is basically what your body does with the energy is that we all have an unlimited flow, or we all have a flow of energy. It's the first law of thermodynamics, right? You can either take away or add more energy, like it's all an even flow of energy. But the whole world is run off energy. And I don't want this to sound like too crazy woo woo, but it is true of like we all have a flow of energy. And what happens in our body is that our brain is going to determine what our body does with that energy. Now, knowing every life process functions on energy, it's essential that we have an open flow of energy. And in that open flow of energy, we're able to maintain a healthy weight. We have enough energy to live our life and go out and live our purpose. Our immune system's firing. Like we just overall feel good. The problem when we get into having the world and our life be a threat is that our body transitions into sympathetic mode or survival mode, where our body literally starts to conserve that energy. So I always say survival is conservation, storing, hoarding. It's it's survival of the fittest. It's fat equals longevity, right? And so it starts to store body fat. Even if you're not eating it, you can start storing it because it's going to take your unlimited flow of energy and it's going to start packaging that up in body fat stores. But not only that, is it's basically channeling energy away from necessary processes in your body, like why in a stress state is fertility impossible? Because we need energy in order to allow reproduction to happen. The same thing what we're seeing with our immune systems is that we don't have the energy it needs to truly fight off whatever it is that's in our environment. And so we're just channeling this energy into negative systems of really just storing and conserving that. And so we feel exhausted, we feel overweight, we feel heavy, and we feel like we ultimately don't have the mind strength and the power to just continuously get healthy. And so this is like, like, oh, you have a hormonal issue, or you have all these, we break it down into systems. But even when we get into hormones, right? Like hormones are never the issue. Hormones are simply the carrier of a message, right? Like it's like you don't like the message the postman dropped off, so we're gonna shoot the postman, right? Like it doesn't make any sense. It's the message being sent. And so I want to go back and I want to say, what message are you sending your body? Based off of what you believe, based off of what you're thinking about, based off of the environment. Really, ultimately, it comes down to based off of how you are living, what message are you sending your body? Because if it's a threat, if it feels like your life is always in turmoil, there's always chaos, that's constantly telling your body store, hoard, and conserve. Like always, you will constantly stay there in that process of sympathetic mode. It stores all these things, but it doesn't go in and clean and heal. And we don't have a chance to kind of release the excess. So you can feel that as like a density in the body that most people don't like. And so in the process of this, like, I don't want us to fixate on our problems, because like looking in the mirror, constantly be focused on the number on the scale, you're reiterating the fact that you are a problem, which says I am a threat. And as soon as you tell yourself you're a threat, of course you go through this. So what would happen if we could just say like, okay, I am where I am because my body has protected me. How can I use that as a means to get healthier? So how can I say where I am, I might not like it, but it doesn't mean I can't love it. And in the process of that, it's like, okay, I realize that I'm not working from a deficit, but I'm working on how can I fill my body with energy? How can I open up those energy channels and allow it to flow? Because when you get into that state of flow, your body's naturally going to release the excess weight without all these like calorie counting and all these things that we think we have to do. No, that can be a threat on the body. Like, let's take working out, for example, of like working out with a bad mindset. You know this, owning a gym. We both know this, right? We own gyms.
Yep.
Working out in a bad mindset, you can see people actually gain weight in the process. They almost get more inflamed. They get frustrated. Maybe they're not losing weight. And they're like, I'm working out so hard and I'm just struggling to even get any weight off. Or if they do lose it, sometimes they'll gain it back as soon as they stop. And that is because of the mindset in which they're doing that, right? Like they're doing that maybe because they're not good enough. They want to lose all the weight, all those things. But if we see people actively listen to the energy flow, say like, today I want to just be energized, right? We're working out not to lose weight. We're working out to feel energized. That completely changes the game, because then some days you might wake up and feel like, today I want to do a really hard, intense workout. Like that's going to give my body energy. But other days you might wake up and be like, man, I just need to sit in the sauna today. Or I just need to go on a walk, or I just need to do some foam rolling, because my body already feels like maybe the energy isn't there. And therefore I'm going to do whatever I can to provide, to fill the body with energy. So it really is like, okay, how can we come back to ourselves and be aware of how our energy is flowing in our body? And really, ultimately, the mindset and the belief patterns that we have that will open us up to realize that maybe we're not as unsafe as we think we are. You know, like to be safe and secure in yourself, even when the world feels incredibly unsafe. I think we can get there. And that's where we start to see our body do what it's designed to do, not store, hoard, and conserve out of security or insecurity and a fear of a lack of energy.
Well, I love the concept of not starting from a deficit. That just hit me between the eyes, Alexa. I'm like, that's what people are struggling with. They, especially if they like, let's just talk about a weight loss journey. Maybe they've lost 100 pounds and they've gained 50 back in quarantine. Mm-hmm. It's like staring up at a big mountain going, well, that was hard the first time, man, this is really going to suck, you know?
Yeah.
And they see themselves in that minus 50 position. Mm-hmm. Like their score is minus 50 right now, mm-hmm. not 0. You know, you're starting from where you stand, and starting from a score of 0 is much better than starting from a score of negative 50. Yeah. So, man, I think that's a really important mental shift, because it's not okay, I have to do all this work and maybe it takes me months and months and months to get back to ground zero, and then I can have a positive attitude. Like, why don't we just have a positive attitude about it right now and accept where we're at? Maybe we got a little crazy during quarantine. We stress ate. We were freaking out. And a lot of people were like that. Okay, let's start from 0 as a baseline score and take that first step forward without all that external pressure that we're just heaping onto our own shoulders. Yeah. So like, what would you say to somebody like that? That's maybe they have packed it on a little bit during the quarantine, which a lot of people have, you know, a lot of people have. So like, let's use that as a specific situations and kind of unravel their headspace a little bit. So somebody has achieved some significant weight loss. They've regained, you know, half of it during the quarantine. How do we not have that pressure on ourselves? Like what advice would you give that person?
Yeah, this is a great question. First, it's in human nature to go through a process of any time we go through a stressful event, that it's going to go into the sympathetic mode of survival. And I think we have to be very clear that no one likes that, but ultimately fat keeps us alive, right? It's a storage of energy. And I don't want to like say that it's okay to have all that, right? But it is a very safe and protective thing for the body to have. Like um we need like a woman, right, as she gives birth, right, like when she's pregnant, she's going to store extra fat as energy stores, not just for the growing baby, for after the fact when she's nursing and feeding that baby. And everyone just kind of beats up their body after that, but it's like, no, like that is the sign that your body is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. And that's the conservation of energy in times when it feels like it's going to need it. So our body is really great about forecasting what's to come. And so in this process, I think one, we have a bad view of what fat is. And I think when we can start to understand like, okay, no, when your body starts to gain weight, there's a threat. It's constantly being inundated by a threat. So rather than just beating it up and berating it and saying like, oh, I took another step back. Oh, I worked so hard on this journey. Like, kind of beating yourself up for being the problem, recognizing that no, fat wasn't the problem. It was a protection. And I think one question that I like to ask people now is, we have this thought of like, okay, why do you want to do it? Right. And I think we all can say why we want to do it. But I think the bigger question is, no, why haven't you done it? Because I think when we understand why haven't or why did we allow ourselves, why were we overeating? Why were we eating ice cream every night? Not to say to beat yourself up, but to understand where your body is and what threats are present in your body and in your mind. Because if we can't understand our threats and what makes or pushes our body into this security mode, which is survival mode, no amount of why you want to do something is going to work, right? Because your survival mechanisms always override any thriving mechanisms. And so if we can go back and understand, okay, yeah, quarantine was stressful, right? Like no one knew what was going on. No one knew when it was going to end. No one still really knows what's going on, right? There's conflicting information. Everyone's scared. Like there's so much uncertainty, and your mind is constantly, or it's designed to make meaning out of everything. And so we're in the midst of this process. Even now, we're all closing loops, right? Like I hear people say, like, when the election is over, then things are going to go back to normal. Like we're all trying to create meaning in this madness. But instead of getting so fixated on these outside things that we cannot control, I want people to come back and recognize, okay, my body did this in safety. What is a threat in my life? And how can I provide the safety I need? Like I used to live my life thinking all these outside things like money or a better relationship with my spouse or having deep, meaningful friendships. All of those things were going to provide the safety I thought I needed when I didn't ever think I could provide it for myself. But now I recognize, no, we're doing it a disservice, not only to ourselves, but everyone around us when we believe that they are like our savior, right? They're our source of ultimately the only thing that we can give ourselves. And so really it's all about not recognizing yourself as you are, where you start now, having compassion on that person, knowing you didn't gain weight on purpose. You didn't choose that. But now we have to know, okay, I didn't choose that, but I also wasn't acting in love towards myself. So now today, what can I choose to do that's going to give me the most energy? What is going to be the most filling thing I can do for myself today? And ironically, most of the time that has less to do with what you put in your body and more to do how you interact with the people around you, how you interact with the world around you. And that's why I say health is so much more about living, because health was designed in us, right? Like I don't see my kids ever really worrying about, especially like my 6-year-old. She never worries about what she puts in her body. Like she doesn't worry about getting her 60-minute workout in a day. Right? Like, no, she is worried about like who she gets to have fun with and like what activities she gets to do and like just living life. And I think that as we've grown, we've realized, oh, it's about us controlling life, when that's the biggest lie, right? Because we have really ultimately no control about what happens outside of us. I mean, we, in some ways we do, but we really don't. But we can control what happens or how we react to the world around us, and how we react changes everything inside of our body. Like it is a perception. So if you can start to see life with more clarity, if you can start to live your day and really focus on what is the most energizing thing to me, guess what? You think a lot less about food because you're no longer needing that energy to fill you up because you're living a mindset that is like negative, negative, negative. Like essentially, our minds are just sucking the energy out of us. So, on the flip side of that, your body's going to crave all these things to fill it up. Like that's emotional eating at its finest, right? It's a biological drive for energy because your mind has channeled it into such an unhealthy direction. It has to start filling it up with these outside food sources. But when you're actively living your life, like think about a day that you like maybe you're on vacation or you're having a blast or whatever, like food wasn't probably as big of a deal as it is on a daily basis for most people, right? Like when you're actively living and living your passion, you don't get as consumed by food because you're recognizing that food is actually not a great place of energy filling. um, it's a tool of providing nutrients, but it's not there as energy. And I want to start to separate the two of like, okay, we have food as calories, but that's not its purpose. Food is a form of nutrient. It's nourishment, right? It's providing nutrients. So you can start to eat for what its intended purpose was, and you can recognize, no, living life is actually how I'm going to fill my tank. Like laughter, having a healthy mindset, playing with your kids, not being so stressed about finances, right? Being in the sunlight, getting fresh air, all of those things are exponentially more filling to our energy tank than any amount of food that you will eat. Exercise, stretching, getting a massage, talking to someone, going to get coffee, like doing podcasts. Like this is so energizing for so many people, that podcast, simply because it literally is giving us an influx of energy based on our perspective. And when you no longer need food for energy, it changes your entire relationship with it because you can recognize that there's so many other components to that. So much more filling.
So, man, I can tell you're so fired up about this, Alexa. I love
am.
it. I love it. I love it because, I'm big on like minimalism, minimalist thinking, stoicism, stoic thinking. And a lot of it just comes down to like, how are you living? Like what, not like, what are you obsessed with? What are you focusing on with your business and how do you compare to others and all this stuff? And it's hard as an entrepreneur, especially an online entrepreneur, like we are, like we live in that social media space where we kind of do have to like show our stuff and we get compared to other people and it's hard to not get in our head about it. But like, yeah, I don't know if I've told you this story before, but it's one of my favorite stories to tell. I was in a mastermind. It was like a year and a half ago at this point, and there were a lot of podcasters that are doing very, very well financially. And we went around and everybody's like talking about their goals. And I'm the last person to go. We're in like a horseshoe.
Yeah.
And I'm the last one to go. And it's like a big one-up show. It's like, oh, I want to make, what's your goal? And they're 100% only talking about financial stuff. Yeah. I want to do 6 figures for my show this year. Oh, I want to do 7 figures. Oh, I want to do 1,000 figures. I want to do $1 bajillion. And then it gets to me. I go, I'm cool with like 60K a year, but I want to, wake up, invest the first hour of my day in me. Mm-hmm. Then I want to be a dad. I want to make breakfast. I want to take my kids to school. I'm going to work for 4 hours a day. I'm going to pick up my kids from school. I'm going to be a dad every evening and on the weekends. Mm-hmm. And all of their jaws dropped. And then we went to a break and I had half the room come up to me and go, I want to set goals like you next time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it was crazy because I'm just like, I don't need a whole lot more than that. But like at the end of my days, like, I don't want to look back and be like, yeah, I made a bunch of money, but I didn't have relationships or I didn't have experiences. I didn't enjoy life, like I was too busy stressing out about that next bill or that next car I got to buy or whatever. And I'm just like, I don't know. It's something I think about a lot. So I'm really glad that you are turning to kind of pivot and shine a light on thinking differently, because I think that's really needed right now. It's a message that I feel like people are ready to hear.
Yeah, I feel like I love what you said, because I think when we start to dissociate from ourselves, right, and we create this gap between who we actually are and where we need to go, that's where it's like all of a sudden now we start to look outside of ourselves and try to figure out, okay, what is going to fix us? What is going to fix us? And anytime you have a problem, you're going to go to an outside source to fix that. And so we start to look what other people have and think, oh, that's going to fix me, or the having more money is going to fix me. Losing the weight is going to fix me. But we've been in this business enough, and you know this probably just as much as I do. When someone gets to their goal weight, it's never what they think it's going to be. And honestly, it's one of the most disheartening things is to help someone reach a point that they think is going to be the epitome of their life. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, that didn't solve all my problems, right? It's kind of like we're working so hard to fix this external shell of who we are, but really the root is on the inside. And we can't ever get to that root by changing what's happening outside of ourselves. We have to go in and we have to see ourselves and recognize what is going to fill me up. Because it really is coming back to yourself. And when you stop or you get rid of this gap, and you really start to see yourself, then you can say like, oh, maybe all those things isn't actually what I value. It's not what I want in life. Like I don't do this show. And I think that's why you have a great audience. I have a great audience because I'm here to say like, oh, here's your problem. Here's your fix, which is ultimately just a mechanism for someone to gather financial success, right? I'm here because I'm like, no, I see you. I love you. And I want you to love yourself and see you like the world sees you. And I'm fighting for that. I'm trying to spin the tables on this because what we have done in the diet space has not worked. And as I'm writing the book, in the book proposal that I wrote, I was like, is there any other system that is 99% of a failure rate? Like 99% of all people who diet will fail. And we still continue on with that, right? Like if we were actually studying a drug, there's no way it would have been thrown out. It would have been tossed as a failure, right? And we would have started over. Yet we continuously cycle through the same patterns over and over and over. And we promote the very thing that we know will not work to people, vulnerable people, and hitting them at their weakest point instead of actually seeing maybe what we're doing is missing the mark. Simply not because of all the things, right? Like I think that there's a lot of great science backing up great things, right? Like we can't argue that on some level, eating less than you work out is probably valuable, right? Like there's foods that have been studied that are really great for you. We can't argue that, but why isn't it working? It has to do more. It has to do less with the behavior modification and more of that belief pattern behind it. And I think that's what differentiates us and makes science so difficult is that we start to pull into this belief component that most other species don't have that make it so difficult. Like even cancer, this blows my mind. But cancer, they can't grow it outside the human body, which signifies that there's 100% an emotional component to cancer and other disease processes. It's really hard. And that's why these cures for these things are so difficult because we can't replicate the emotional component and the energetic frequencies that are happening on a daily basis inside of a human. And I think that we miss that. We fail to see that. It's almost like we're robots who should follow this perfect system. But if we look at the human body, it's cyclical, just like the seasons, right? Like we're constantly changing. And so if we can't come back to ourselves and recognize who we are and what fills us up, it might work for 30 days or 60 days, but as soon as a new season hits or as soon as a new work cycle hits or something's going to blow up in your life, and then guess what? They fall off. People say they'll start again when life calms down. Yeah. Life isn't going to calm down. So how can we step up to life and really live it? But so I love that. Like it is about coming back to recognize, no, like money's not going to fix your problems. All these things aren't, but what will? And I think ultimately what we're all looking for is to be more joy-filled, right? Like to be more passionate. And that's one of the reasons why, like with Simple Roots Radio Simple Roots, everyone's like, you can't quit. It's so successful, all these things. And I've listened to them for years. I remember in January sitting down and I was like, I'm going to rebrand. Everyone at the table said, no, you're not. You have a recognizable brand. You're not going to do it. And they told me all the reasons why it was a bad idea. And I believed them. But as February went on and March went on, guess what happened to me? I lost passion. I was not as energetic. I almost walked away completely. I realized maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe I don't have anything to say here. And then it was finally I think in June, I don't remember, May or June, when I was like, no, this is what I'm going to do. Like this isn't going to work because I'm not in it, right? Like you tell me that what I'm going to do or what I want to do isn't going to work, but this isn't going to work because I don't want it. And I think that's what is happening in the health space. You're being told what to do, but who wants that?
Yeah.
Right? Like, no, you have to want it for a new reason and a new purpose other than the one that you're being taught. And I think when you start working at those levels, those higher energy levels, some people believe in the law of attraction or whatever. I just really believe it's because when you start working at a higher level, you start to see more of that, right? Like if I'm sad and depressed and like so in my head and thinking I'm a failure and there's something wrong with me, guess what? Everything in my life sucks, right? Because that's all I can see. And I lived there for a really long time. And people with trauma, negativity becomes a very safe home for them. And so it is really hard to get out of that. But as I've kind of raised myself to be more joy filled, to be happier and choose that on a daily basis, to practice more gratitude, I recognize it's not necessarily just writing down things that make me feel grateful, but it opens me up to see more of that space. It's not, I think I used to think it just wasn't there. It's always there. It's just a matter of what you're going to see.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it is. I mean, it takes a boldness, but what if more of us did that, right?
I know. Okay. Now, along those lines, I'm kind of feeling something here, Alexa. I'm feeling you wanting to step into that you use the phrase woo-woo world a little bit, like those things like energetic philosophies and things like that. So I'm going to encourage it. What's the most like woo-woo thing that you're into or that you're like, I kind of like, I'm thinking along these terms that people might be surprised with, like the typical Simple Roots radio listener might be like, whoa, I didn't know she was into that. So like, is it law of attraction or like, what would you say would be that thing?
I struggle with law of attraction, so I'm definitely not on that boat yet. And the reason for it is, yes, I believe positivity attracts positivity, but I think the more that I've studied that, I think it's an opening up of your perspective. And so I don't think it's just all of a sudden, like you can think all these stoplights are going to turn green and they're going to turn green. I think you're just more aware of what actually is there. And I think, and the reason I say that is because I think it makes it more achievable for more people to be like, no, it's there. What are you seeing?
Right.
Honestly, I think that there is a huge soul component to health. And I think that's where I'm going. I'm a Christian. And so I believe that, there's one creator, and I don't want to get into that to stir everyone up, but I think in the health space, I think people have seen me as that. And I want to take that because in the Christian space, energy had no place. But I think that all of life is energy. Like we can measure energy everywhere in our house, right? Like every electrical circuit is an energy pattern, right? Like it's all over. We're using Wi-Fi. All these things are energetic beings. So I don't know why people think it's like unnecessary that it's in the body. But I think even deeper than that, like when you get into that spiritual side of things, is to say like, hold up. Like, I think, one of the things that, and I don't want to get into this like religious debate on your podcast, Adam, so stop me. But I do think that in the Christian space, at least, a lot of people have a bad notion of it, right? Like the whole health movement is moving in a spiritual way. But I think in the Christian space, we're really far behind. And the reason I say that is because I think we look at God as all these things outside of ourselves, but never inside of ourselves. And I think ultimately, like in the God that I believe in, he is active and alive and working in us and through us. And we want to see him in all these outside things, and we work for him, and we get this very legalistic view of health, and we have this right and wrong, and like that's moral, that's not moral. Like, what if that's the dissociation of like, I don't really know what I believe, but these things feel like they're threatening my belief. And therefore it looks everything the opposite of what I feel like Christianity should be. And that's an absolute picture of love, we can only love because we have been loved. And so when you are safe in yourself and your belief patterns, guess what? All these things outside of the world no longer become threats to us. And I think that is kind of where I'm going. I mean, I think I'll keep the energy on like the biological standpoint, but ultimately it starts, I think, from our heart and our belief system of what it is that we believe and how safe that we feel and what it is that we believe in. Because there's that hope there that has that. And so I think when I get into that, I think I'm going to push the bounds and say, I do believe in energy patterns in our body. I do believe that there is an energy to our soul. And ultimately, like our mind, right? Like health has moved to our mind, but our mind is not a safe thing. Like our mind is not, we can work on our mind, we can do those things, but really our mind is made up of memories. It's made up of belief patterns or that have been put on you by other people, right? It's our mind stores memories. It's not necessarily a source of positivity, and I think that's why our mind is naturally negative. It's the protective mechanism of the body. It's our ego, right? It stores our ego. Necessary, absolutely. But I think if we're working and trying to change our mind, I think that's also a really hard space to be in, and it doesn't create the change that people are looking for. I think we have to take it all the way back to those belief patterns, because it's in our beliefs that then we can challenge our mind. When our mind's saying, nope, life's a threat. Nope, COVID's not going away. Oh my gosh, what's happening with this election? Like all of these massive decisions that, yes, we should take an active role in, but should they determine the course of what happens inside of your body? No, we should not give our power away. And that's what our mind likes to do. It likes to give our power to things that ultimately should have no control over our body, because that's where our ego comes in. But when you get back to your belief patterns, you can say like, okay, this is what my mind is thinking, but I know because of what I believe in, this thought is not healthy. And that's how you change it. And in that process, right, your body is just a byproduct of what you believe. And so in that process, you can change that. You know, it's not just a matter, I think we have to throw out the notion that it's just about behavior modification, because we can do that for a short period of time. But as soon as you start to threaten what it is that you believe, it's all out the window, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where, like, even when I say like woo-woo things, like those limiting belief patterns, I don't even think that's woo-woo, but you know, like I think we all have those limiting belief patterns to say like, okay, I want to lose weight. I want to feel better. So I'm going to change my behavior modification. I'm going to do calorie counting, or I'm going to exercise X days a week. I'm going to cut this food out of my life, which can work in the short term. But if you have an underlying belief that your body is flawed, that it will never be healthy, guess what? Those beliefs take over your mind and make it impossible for any behavior modification to stick. Just like what's happening with COVID, right? We have underlying belief patterns and the world is threatening those, right? Like it's knocking down that door, and we're doing more and more and more to push it away, because God forbid anything come in and challenge our inner beliefs. But when you're safe and secure and loved because of who you are, you can open that dialogue and you can make the best decision for yourself, not give your power away to all these other things. Adam, I'm ranting. Stop me.
Alexa Schirm. I'm just turning you loose. I knew you had a lot to say on this, and I can tell again, as a friend, I've seen you sorting this out over the past year.
Yeah.
So I've been very excited, and I've invited you more than once, I will say. And in our email exchanges, I'm like, you got to sign up for an interview. You got to come on. And you're like, oh, let's see. And then finally,
I wasn't quite there yet.
We got it. I'm like, yes, yeah. Now we're going to talk about it. Damn, I'm just so proud of you for going there. Like, I know you're outside of your comfort zone, like way out there, but you've really thought through this. And honestly, like, you're one of the most intelligent people I've ever talked to. Like, hearing you talk about this and the way that you deliver this message, I'm just like, my eyebrows are on fire, you know, like I'm like you're blowing me away. Let's make sure that people know how to get plugged into your new stuff, because you've got new brand, new podcast, new website, all of that. And I know, as I've said, my audience worships the ground that you walk on. So we're going to make sure they can continue to stay plugged into your world. So what's the new space, and where do they connect at?
Yeah. So it's called The Living Well. and that's a new place. And honestly, the new space that I want to carry is really about like coming there and getting filled. So how can I give you health tips, mindset tips, soul tips that can really just, I don't want to say challenge your beliefs, but help you form beliefs, but also give you the super practical of like, oh, maybe this is why meal planning isn't working for you. And here's some tips that could make it more practical. So it's kind of this verge of like, I want to push you to this deep space, but I also want to know that like this is a journey. And I want to take that with you and walk you hand in hand as we're learning through this. We're not done learning. This health game is going to go on forever, right? And so the Living Well will have a blog, but then I'll also have a podcast, which is called The Weekly Fill. And it's just a weekly podcast that is just designed to give you tips about how to increase the flow of energy in your body and leave you feeling well, like just feeling good. Ultimately, all of it is just to get you to experience health in its intended design. And honestly, you're so much closer than you think. So I'm just there to help you open up to that. So those are the places.
Amazing. All right. And I'll link all that up in the show notes, of course, to all the listeners out there. Let's leave them with a little bit of something, a little bit of action step. Let's say that somebody listening is where you were a year ago, in their head, not knowing who they are. They're on that journey of self-discovery. Like, what is one bit of advice, action step, anything that you think would help them shorten their learning curve that you've been on over the past year? Like what's something you would tell that person if you could sit them down and look them in the eye?
Yeah. So I think one of the most beneficial things that I was able to open myself up to is, I think this is actually a technical term, but I called it the pendulum healing. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've read something similar to this, but I just call it pendulum healing. And it's essentially I recognized I'm here, right? Like just one, let's see where you are. And in the process of coming home to yourself, I think it is like, I'm going to go to this deep place and start to have a conversation with myself, start to recognize who I am and what it is, the things that I have believed in, and see if those are you. But also in the pendulum, you have to come back to the other side and get you to experience that health. That's like that keep you going. We talked about this on your podcast. I need something that's going to make me feel like I'm making progress. And so I would say two things. One, I want you to go back and I want you to, or just come back to yourself and just take a moment and recognize, like, what am I chasing and why? Like, what am I chasing and why? Some of us don't even know what we're chasing. And just kind of coming back to, like, is that worth it? Or who am I? Like, what am I right now? And can that be enough? And then I want you to think about, what is one thing I can do today that is going to give me the most energy? So maybe it's going on a walk when you get home. Maybe it's soaking in an Epsom salt bath. Maybe it's just calling a friend or going to bed 30 minutes earlier, right? Like, what is one thing I can do today that is going to fill me up? I think getting you back into those patterns of, like, just waking up every day or before every meal, instead of food being good or bad, right or wrong, just looking at it and thinking, how can this give me energy? Like, what can I eat today that's going to give me the energy that I need? And those would be like my most practical. This is hard because we want standards, we want rules. And this is what I believe. I think we all want boundaries, right? Like, boundaries are a very healthy and necessary thing for human design. We want that, like, we live on a farm, right? We want that fence. Like, if we open up the fence and let the animals roam, they stay in the fence, right? Like, they think they want out, but they don't want out. They want back in. Because the boundaries have created a safety mode in the body. So boundaries create safety. So I want you to start thinking in this process of, like, what boundaries in my life do I need to establish, not to be all or nothing, but what things can help make me feel safe, but also give me room to grace, give me room to grow and expand and become a better version. And so, like, some basic things are, like, in the health space, right? Like, I think intermittent fasting is great. What that looks like should be different for every person and be inconsistent daily. Exercise. We know moving our body is great. The boundary is, I'm going to move my body. What that looks like can change based on what's going to give you the most energy. So even waking up tomorrow and saying, like, oh, I normally do a workout. I normally do a 90-minute, CrossFit workout every single morning. Wake up tomorrow and ask, is that what is going to give me the most energy today? And if it's not, give yourself the grace to be like, hey, I'm just going to go hit the trail for 30 minutes, or I'm going to hop on my bike. I love bike riding and I never do it because why? It doesn't seem like a workout, right? I got to do all these Peloton and all these other things. Like, yes, that can be good, but what is right for you today? And starting to just understand those patterns of what fills you up. And when you get back into not what's right or wrong can be a dissociation for yourself. You don't have to know yourself to know what's right or wrong. When you have to talk about what's going to give you energy, that's a different story. You have to start paying attention and creating that self-awareness, which is the key to all of success.
Beautiful advice, my friend. My goodness. This has been so good. Alexa, here's exactly, I'm going to be totally honest with you. This is exactly what's going through my mind right now.
Okay.
I feel like I just interviewed Brene Brown, like legit. I'm I just interviewed Brene, like that. You just went off for an hour of like, you just passionately explaining what the heck's been going through in your life, the stuff you've been working out in your own head, but you're taking us along on that journey. And I just feel like the way you're delivering, the passion that you're delivering this with, like I can tell you have found you, and you have found your message, and you found that thing that's adding the juice to your life. So I'm really excited about this. I'm so proud of you. And I'm just super appreciative again that you're spending some time with me and my audience.
Of course. So, I have to be honest. You're one of the first people who really opened up space for me to be myself. And I think that that's a rarity of people unintentionally or intentionally creating an agenda for you. You see it on podcasts a lot, and you were honestly one of those first people that interviewed me that I felt like I could actively open up. And my husband still talks about that because he must have been listening in another room or listened to the podcast. And he's like, that podcast you did with Adam, that was the first time I felt like you really came to life. Wow. And I was like, you just give me space, and you've always been there, and you've always been encouraging me on this journey. And I think we all need people in our life that are like that. There's going to be a lot of noisy people who maybe are the closest people to you that aren't actively helping you in any way, but you have to find those people who are like, nope, I see you. Like, I see you. And I think we all just want to be seen, and you've seen me through this process. So I can't thank you enough for giving me that space to do that. It really does mean a lot to me.
Well, my friend, I can't wait to see what happens next. That's all I'm going to say. I can't wait to see what happens next. I'm going to start entering your name in for like TED Talks and all that.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Move over Brene Brown.
My limiting beliefs, like, this is the reality of what I'm still going through. I want to be like, I want to diminish you. I want to be like, no way. Like, you're crazy for okay. Can we say that we all have those patterns of like, all of a sudden when someone gives you a compliment, like, my natural tendency is just to be a negative person because that's like the past trauma. And I'm really working on that, of being like, it takes a lot of work just to say thank you and not like follow it up of like, but I'm going to lower myself back down so like, just to know we're all a work in progress, but it really does mean a lot to me that you and your audience, I think life is just about seeing other humans. And the more we can see them, I think it does great things. And I think that's why you're so successful at what you do, is you're not just putting out more information, but you're really, on the other side of it, you're truly seeing me. And that means the world to me.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Alexa has given you a lot to think about. This may be I know a lot of people listening on 1.5 speed. You may have had to slow it down a little bit. You may have to hit rewind and replay. But this is important stuff. Like, this isn't one of those benchmark episodes where we're going to make you guys think. And if initially you feel that abrasive emotion pop up, that may be a sign that you really do need to consider this, because you could be like, going in projection mode. I don't need this. This is what my husband needs to listen to this, not me, or my wife needs to listen to this, not me. If you're saying those sorts of things, that this may be the message that you actually need to hear. So think about it, over the next 24 hours. What is that one idea that Alexa talked about that you want to take action on? What's that first domino that you're going to flick over to create some momentum in your life in that area? And that, my friends, is how we get out there and own it. Every meal, every workout, every day. I will see you on the next episode. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you got a ton out of it. If you feel like you need a little bit of a boost, a little bit of an accountability buddy, a little bit of coaching, I've got my 28-day coaching program open and ready to help. You can go to millionpoundmission.com and apply. I take a few people each week. I like to stagger them out as we onboard new people so you get maximum attention. We're touching base every week with video chats. We've got a daily Google Doc that I call the Client Hub that we check in with on a daily basis. We really dig in with your macros, your calories, your fitness. I supply all the resources you need in all those areas, and it's supportive accountability to help you burst through that plateau, to reverse your momentum from negative to positive, and really get after those goals that you've been shooting for so long. It's time to go from goal setting to goal achieving, and the 28-day coaching program is the way to get it done. Head on over to millionpoundmission.com and submit your application today.